It is
Yeah.
not controversial, not at all. Carl, there's a lot of interest in you personally. I know you're one of the most modest guys I know, but you were basically a champion mountain biker before this event, and you had the second vaccine in June 2021. Just can you give us just a brief timeline of what happened after that, and sort of bring us up to date to the current place where you are now? So, how long after the June 2021 vaccine did you start to get symptoms, and what were those symptoms?
Yeah, so it was interesting because I actually had my first dose, I believe it was around May 14th, somewhere around there, of 2021. And for that month, I wasn't having severe symptoms by any means, but looking back on it, I was struggling with fatigue a lot. And so I was having some sort of reaction where I was just really, really tired, couldn't get anything done. I was just laying in bed, 4, 5, 6 hours throughout the day and just extremely fatigued. And I couldn't figure out what was happening. And I didn't obviously think about it being the vaccine. I was just naive at that point, and basically there was no reason to expect that it was, because of the messaging was like, this is an innocuous thing that'll just help. So anyways, when I got my second dose, that ramped up. So for that next month after that second dose, that ramped up, and I started to have kind of heart palpitations, or like almost this feeling of fluttering, or my heart, just skipping a beat. And that was happening for that next month. And so I took it really easy, again, still dealing with a lot of fatigue. And finally, after about a month of that, I decided to try to start just getting back into the groove of things and riding mountain bikes again. That was your early summer, so all the resorts are starting to open up. And yeah, I went on a mountain bike ride. It was around, I believe, July 16th. And that was when I had my first major cardiac issue. And so had basically my heart rate go up to about 170, 180, climbing up a hill, which is like, normally it would be around 130-ish, so that was elevated, and I didn't feel very good, but it wasn't something that's like, oh, this is so strange, I'm climbing a hill, why is my heart rate high? But what was weird is that after getting down the hill and getting to the car, my heart rate stayed at like 140 for about 45 minutes, and I couldn't get it to come down. And I was with an older guy named Bill, who had actually had 2 heart attacks in his life. And so he was looking at me, and I was really flushed, and he's like, dude, you need to go to the hospital, this isn't good. So we ended up driving back to Boise. Again, my heart would not come down. And so after I got home for just a second, because it was like on the way, we were in Sun Valley, Idaho. Got home, changed for a second just to get ready for the hospital. Still heart rate like 130, 140, having really bad kind of pressure in my chest, but it didn't feel like a sharp pain. It was just like a fullness. And yeah, just went into the ER, and that was the first experience, I guess, of dealing with this. And so I kind of told the doctor, hey, I don't know what's happening. This is the only thing I can think of. I've been fine my whole life. I haven't had any cardiac issues. Went for a mountain bike ride. I'm having this issue. Recently I did read that there were some young men having issues after the vaccine. I don't know if that's what this could be. And that was a really big mistake, because that immediately just, turned off the guy, who was a nurse practitioner. And he essentially was like, this guy's crazy. I don't want to deal with this. And so I was in the hospital for a long time, in the waiting room for I think 3 hours. Finally got pulled back. They did an EKG and just looked at my heart. They're like, it seems pretty normal. And then they did troponin levels, and I had an elevated troponin, which is a marker for heart inflammation. But they were basically saying, well, if you rode your mountain bike, it's possible that your troponin is elevated from that. And so I'm not going to worry about it. And so they gave me a big anti-inflammatory shot and essentially monitored me for a bit. The troponin started to trend downward a bit after the anti-inflammatory shot. And then they're like, all right, you're free to go. And they didn't really set me up with much continuing care, because again, I think they thought it was just a massive anxiety attack. And then I was in bed rest for about 3 days after that. Finally kind of went out to go to the grocery store, had another big cramp and chest pain, and my heart ran away again. Went to the hospital second time, to a different hospital, and they took me a lot more seriously, and finally got me into a cardiologist, where I was diagnosed with pericarditis, so inflammation of the liner of the heart. And after that, it was just this journey of basically resting for at least a month or two, just trying to figure out what was going on a lot of aspirins. They told me they were worried about me throwing a clot potentially, so they kept me on blood thinners, and it was really scary for a while there. I remember just each night going to bed and not really knowing what would happen, and just kind of closing my eyes, and then every time I would wake up, I was like, oh, I made it, and it was pretty bad for a bit. Like, I remember transferring money to a joint account and just not sure what was going to happen, and I was just making sure my partner would be taken care of if something did happen. But luckily, over the next month or two, things started to get a bit better. I got into the cardiologist and they gave me some medicine called colchicine, which is supposed to help with pericarditis, and it definitely did help. And then through the next few months, it was this journey of talking to you, going to Senate, talking about these issues, and getting diagnosed with something called POTS as well, which is postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. And then I was also diagnosed with something called mast cell activation syndrome. And so that was basically just hyperactive immune system reacting to everything. And that's something that they're finding more with this now too, is your eosinophils are affected in some way, your monocytes are affected in some way, IgE seems to be affected. And basically my whole body was just on red alert for everything. And so, yeah, I guess the last couple of years, it's been a journey of trying to get my body to calm down. I still have essentially like recurrent autoimmune pericarditis. And so what happens to me now is, although the POTS is gone for the most part and I don't really have those symptoms anymore, I do still have chest fullness and kind of chest pains after strenuous activity. But what I found is that if I keep my heart rate below about 140, and so that kind of zone 2 threshold, then I can be active without any issues. But then if I were to do a sprint or try to do a race run on my mountain bike or something of that nature and get my heart rate above 150, then I'll have chest pain for a few days afterwards. And this past spring, or I guess a year ago spring, I did like a test race run and my heart got up to about 190 and it was a 4-minute race run. And after that, I had chest pain for 10 days. So it's just like completely dependent on how hard I push is whatever, I guess, the amount of stress my heart gets put under, and then it'll trigger an autoimmune inflammation. So I'm trying to figure out how to get that to be better. If anyone has any issues if anyone has any advice, that would be something I'd love to learn, because I've had several people reach out who dealt with pericarditis and many of them said it took multiple years for it to resolve. So I guess I'm almost at 3 years in now and I'm hoping that it will get better. It seems to be trending in the right direction, but I definitely haven't been able to, do what I love, which is go out on mountain bike rides without having issues. And when I got into DC, I haven't been able to ride much. I tried to join like a little gym and do, I guess, some like more CrossFit activity workouts. And I made it about 2 weeks before having chest pains and cramping in my sleep and things of that nature. So it's just really frustrating to go from being an athlete to basically, I can like walk and ride an electric bike and do things of that nature. And then as soon as I push, then I just have this recurrent inflammation. And I don't know exactly what the mechanism of action is, but yeah, it's frustrating.
But I mean, it's evidenced. The inflammation is evidenced by the pain you get for that period of time afterwards, isn't it? One of the hardest things for a long time was with the mast cell activation syndrome, which is basically a severe allergic reaction to anything. There's one, I forget exactly what it's called, but I think it's like you would probably know what it is, dermographia or something. It's where basically if you hit the skin or touch the skin, then it'll start to raise up in hives. And so I didn't have that, but several people I know have developed that. And what I had that was really frustrating is like light sensitivity. And so I would break out in hives if I was in the sun too much. And being like an active mountain bike guy, that was really frustrating. But that's gotten a lot better over time. And I was on a medicine called cromolyn sodium for quite a while, which is pretty expensive, but it's a mast cell stabilizer. And then I did a lot of breathing exercises and ice baths and things of that nature to try to reset my nervous system and bring it down a bit and regulate it. And so if I am really on top of it with that stuff, then I feel pretty good. And if I'm traveling a lot and not able to do those practices, then I definitely have issues with the mast cell still being a problem. So just being really active to things. Yeah. The pain you get after exercise, it's not a sharp pain, is it? It's more like a heavy pain. A feeling of fullness is more the sort of pain you get.
Yeah, the way I explain it to people is it feels like you just have a balloon, and if you were to inflate it and it just has a little bit of pressure. And then the thing I notice the most is if I let it go, like if I'm not really good at catching it right away, then it'll happen when I'm sleeping and really relaxed. I'll have my heart kind of like cramp and that'll jolt me awake. And the other day, like I was grabbing groceries and had them in my hand, and then I had a really big cramp and dropped everything and was like holding my chest. And so I don't know, it's scary because I don't know if it's going to ever trigger something worse. But from what I've talked to cardiologists, it's very rare for like pericarditis symptoms to manifest in a cardiac arrest. I feel like pretty confident that I'll be okay with that, but I definitely get nervous about that. especially, staying alone and then having it happen at night sometimes if I'm trying to push or kind of work out a lot. So that happened quite a bit this past summer. And then it just happened a few weeks ago, and it was a little bit scary because I think the hardest thing is mentally I'll start to feel like I'm back to normal and I'm trending in the right direction and building, and I'll start to push myself a bit more to test. And, at the gym, we basically ran for one of the workouts one day, and just the running was what triggered it. And then that night I had massive heart cramp, and it's just so frustrating to go from feeling like you're on the way back and then, okay, things are good. And then just having this reminder of like, no, still have some issues. We've got to figure this out. And I'm really hopeful that I can figure out ways to mediate it and just get it better. And I think the biggest thing so far has been the hyperbaric oxygen therapy. That was like massively helpful for me when I did that in 2022. And so I did 70 sessions of that, but it's really expensive. It's around $200 a session. And so that was obviously cost prohibitive, and it's hard to find a clinic that does it. And I think there's one in Mexico that my friend Paul Bass is really good friends with, and they offered to basically have me come down and do some this fall. So I think I'll do that and try to just do another course of it and see if I can kind of get one more bump up.
Yeah. And there's good reasons why that can be beneficial. There's a lot of physiological reasons why that can work. Do the doctors think you've got any myocarditis as well, Kyle, or do they think it's limited?
I think, yeah, so I did a cardiac MRI. I also did like a CT angiogram, which is like where they inject the radioactive fluid and all those different tests. And so it seemed like I avoided a lot of myocarditis. So that was really great. I don't have like major signs of scarring in my heart, but just this autoimmune pericarditis that keeps happening is what I'm dealing with the most. So yeah, it seems like my heart is relatively healthy aside from just this recurrent pericarditis, which is frustrating. And then also the mast cell. And so
activation syndrome.
Yeah. And it's interesting because at the end of the day, like I said, it basically just my body went on to like red alert and just hyperactive immune system. And so anytime it thinks it's under stress or under attack, then it just reacts. And that's what a lot of people have, very similar symptoms where they're basically just elevated to the max. And it's kind of interesting that so many young, healthier men that are affected have very similar symptoms. And I mean, I'm sure you've gotten messages where people basically, they tell you the story and it sounds like I'm telling you my story, like verbatim. It's like the same symptomology, the same timeline. I have people messaging me saying, hey, I'm fine. And then every time I work out too hard, then I have this chest pain. And so it's like, there's some mechanism of action that needs to be investigated. And I don't know, it's hard because like I went the other day to sign up for this big thing in DC called the World Vaccine Congress, which is this big event where they bring in thousands of scientists and doctors to study and talk about like the latest technology in vaccines. And I was signed up for over a month and just really wanted to go in and talk to people and just say, hey, like if you're doing studies, I volunteer. I would love to just be a guinea pig and try to help people get an understanding of this. And about a week before the event, I got an email saying, hey, you've been canceled and your registration is refunded. And the note said, we only allow people who are in alignment with our goals at this event. And I was like, what? So I don't know. I'd signed up as myself, basically representing myself as media. And it was interesting to see that note, like we only allow people that are in alignment with our goals. And at first I was just like, do you even know what my goals are? Because my goal is to try to understand this and help injured Americans. And if you guys are not in alignment with that, then it seems a little bit at odds with science, right? But yeah, that was that's just what we're dealing with right now is like people don't want to have an honest conversation because I think there's too much money to be made by ignoring this issue.
Is your fitness slightly better now? Because I remember talking early 2022, and basically you couldn't ride your bike at all then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's much better.
It's a bit better than then, is it?
Yeah, it's gotten so much better. Like everything has been trending in the right direction. It's gotten so much better. And there was a point where, like just even getting into the shower in the morning was difficult. Like I would just have runaway heart rate, 130, 140 doing that. And now, I can go on walks or kind of like light jog on a treadmill, or I can ride my electric mountain bike without any issues. And like I said, it's not till I really get that zone 3, zone 4, where whatever's happening hormetically, it triggers like a stress response. And then my body thinks, oh no, like his heart's under attack. Let's go and send like this inflammatory response there. So it's gotten much, much better. And if I wasn't an athlete in a past life, I would say that my quality of life is pretty much great. Like, it's really good aside from I just have to be cognizant of what I eat and just make sure I don't have any of these kind of immune or mast cell reactions. Like I still have a hyperactive immune system, but other than that, if I just monitor it and I'm really good, then I have a great quality of life compared to what it was 2 years ago for sure.
But it's hard work. You've got to keep working at it, haven't you? And it's really weird that you've got this kind of threshold that just triggers this renewed episodes of inflammation. Is it worse if you do a particular amount of exercise that involves bouncing up and down? So you're physically, the heart's physically moving inside the pericardium. Does that make it worse compared to, say, cycling on a smooth surface?
I don't know. I'll try to keep, track of that and see if that makes a difference. But it seems like it doesn't really matter from what I've experienced, because I could be either jogging or cycling or just anything. If I get my heart rate above basically 150, 160 for a sustained amount of time, then I'll have chest pain afterwards. And I don't know if it could be just when it's beating at such a high frequency that the friction is there, or there's some issue where it's causing like a irritation or a response. But I don't know. I've talked to several different doctors about it, and some of them think that there's things called tight junctions that the lipid nanoparticle could have basically opened up or caused to stay open, and there might be issues there. There could be spike present, which is causing inflammation. So no one really knows exactly what is going on. But I'm hoping we can try to figure it out and monitor it. So,
do you know if you are still producing spike protein, if they tested for that, either for the antigen or for the antibodies to the spike protein?
Yeah, it's been a while since I did a test for that. In 2022, I had Dr. Patterson's group do a test where they did spectroscopy and looked to see if I had spike in my blood, and they did not find any. So that was the
antigen, the actual spike protein itself.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So they did not find any. But what's really interesting, and maybe you could do a video on this, but there's some evidence that endurance athletes express more ACE2 receptors on their heart tissue.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if maybe I have like bound spike in my heart tissue, where basically if it bound to the ACE2 receptor and then I have fragments of it there that's causing irritation.
There,
yeah. So I don't know. And like I said, I think that's why I want to just go talk to these doctors and scientists and be studied. Like I would love to be studied, and I would love to help other people figure out what's going on with them as well. Because I get messages from people, especially like military guys that were active, and they basically tell me, I feel pretty good most of the time, but then when I try to do training or try to get fit and like basically how I used to be, then I start to experience heart pain. And yeah, there's just something.
We're getting this story from all around the world. This is definitely, a recognized syndrome now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, what would be interesting to me is if they could do antibody tests. So if you've got immunoglobulin type M's, that means you've got ongoing spike protein now. Immunoglobulin type G, immunoglobulin type G you'd expect to have. That's kind of a longer term thing. If you've got immunoglobulin type M's, that would indicate that you're still making spike protein.
Yeah, and it's interesting too with people that are, I don't know if you've probably done a lot more research on this part, but with the reverse transcription into like liver DNA and the potential of maybe your body can continually producing spike well past the vaccine. Is that something that you've looked at data on that seems plausible?
It is completely plausible, and there's certainly in vitro evidence for it. And I've talked to many people who are quite convinced that they still have that. But again, this immunoglobulin type M test would be really useful in diagnosing that, I would have thought. We need a global sort of research project on that to see if this is in fact occurring, and whether any spike protein that is still around is produced as a result of reverse transcriptase into DNA.
Mm-hmm.
We really need answers to that question.
One of the people in our group, husband and wife, their son passed away, a 30-year-old son passed away from an aortic dissection, which is basically like his heart swelled and the aorta ripped, and he ended up passing away in his sleep. And so when they did the autopsy, they found myocarditis, pericarditis, and spike in the aorta. And so that was, very, very telling that it was a vaccine injury. He also had Moderna, I believe, which was 3 times a dose of the Pfizer vaccine, which a lot of people don't realize. So I think that's been eye-opening too, when you tell people like, yeah, Moderna was 90 micrograms of RNA and then Pfizer was 30, then you're like, oh wow, it's 3 times the dose of this RNA. And I don't know, it's just interesting to see how little was talked about at the time. because a lot of people don't realize that they're kind of testing different dosages on people with these different shots. It's like, why is Pfizer 30? Why is Moderna 90? Why, is the childhood one so much less? And it wasn't really well talked about, or you didn't have any informed consent of what you were taking. Because it seems like Moderna was the most cardioactive, and then Pfizer was slightly less cardioactive. And, if you're getting 3 times the dose, that's a good potentially reason why.
Yeah, and this poor guy that sadly died, how long? Do you know how long after his last vaccine that was, when he was still expressing spike protein in the aorta?
I don't want to misrepresent it, but I know it was within a month.
Right. Okay. So it was fairly acute. Yeah. A lot of people are interested in your, because you actually, for the amount of insult that your body has suffered from this vaccine. I mean, you have actually optimized your health as well as you can. A lot of people are interested in that. Just tell us a little bit about your diet, Kyle, if you don't mind. What helps? What makes it worse?
Well, it was way worse in 2022 when I was doing a lot of the testing and diagnosed with the mast cell activation syndrome. And so what we ended up doing then was like this big skin prick test. And I can find you the photo of it, but my whole back is just lit up. And so then they were saying, all right, well, the fact you're allergic to everything means that it's probably an immune reaction, not necessarily that you're actually allergic to those foods. And so they had me write down like foods that I was consuming most often. And then we did IgE blood tests for those foods to try to see it. I don't know, I did a little thumbs up. So, but yeah, we did the blood tests for those, and they were just able to help me diagnose, all right, these are the ones that you're reactive to, these are the ones you're less reactive to. And essentially I was just on the sodium cromolyn and then trying to be very limited with my food to make sure I just wasn't triggering a reaction. But over time, that's gotten to the point where I can eat a much more varied diet. Like I said, if I essentially am consuming things that I'm reactive to, and I possibly had a light allergy to them before, and then it just basically got worse with my immune system being so hyperactive.
Were you aware of any allergies before the vaccine injury?
No, none that I was aware of. So it wasn't anything that I'd ever dealt with to the point of like, oh, I need to take allergy meds or I need to be careful of this or that. It was just a thing of, I guess, maybe there are some underlying sensitivities that I wasn't aware of that got worsened. And so, I don't know.
You weren't aware of them if there were?
No. But yeah, seems like just very basic ones that a lot of people struggle with, which is, eating a lot of like wheat or rice or quinoa, or things of that nature that are maybe heavy in certain pesticides, then that can cause me to break out in hives. A lot of oils, I have to be careful what oils I consume. Like rice bran oil especially makes me break out really bad. So I'll have like bumps all over and break out in hives, and just little things like that I've just done through trial and error, trying to figure out what makes me feel good. But when I'm at home and I can be consistent, I just have a very basic diet and just, air fryer chicken and eggs and, whatever, like just very, very basic.
Simple foods. Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of people that are dealing with this and in the support groups, they have a similar experience where they just find what works for them and then they just stick to it. But there is some issues with that as well, where when you have like a very unvaried diet, then that can cause long-term issues and complications. So you have to just be mindful of that as well.
Of course. Have you tried, what's your experience with ivermectin, Kyle?
Well, so that was interesting because I had actually taken it before the whole Joe Rogan debacle where, he mentioned that he took it and then it just became this massively vilified substance. But when I took it early on, people basically told me, if you're having a reaction to the vaccine, try taking this, see if it may kind of arrest the reaction a little bit. And so I did, and I felt like it did help me from getting worse. I felt like it basically, I was having issues, I was starting to spiral downhill with the cardiac issues and just feeling so sick. And then after taking that for basically the week course, I feel like either just the timing of it or the medicine itself helped me kind of plateau, and I stopped getting worse. And so I feel like it did help me in some capacity. But at the time I took it, I did not know that it was a controversial substance to be taking. I didn't realize that it was going to get vilified in the way that it did. And it caused a lot of drama later on when people were like, oh, you took the horse medicine, like all this stuff. And it was so frustrating. But I haven't taken it many times. I haven't, I wasn't like a diehard on it. So I don't have a ton of experience to talk about it with. But yeah, I don't know. It was so interesting to watch that happen, where I remember the day that the Joe Rogan thing happened, and then one of the older videos I had done started just getting comments like just coming through. And I was like, how crazy is this that, I guess the programming of mainstream media is really, really powerful. And I'm sure you've seen it, but it's wild to watch it in effect. You're just like, what the hell?
Yeah.
But some people swear by it. And I don't know how much you've looked into the long-term complications of like what it does to your gut biome or things of that nature. So I think that would be the thing I'd be the most curious about, is understanding what the effects of taking it for a long period of time are. Because there are some people that got on it and basically just take it proactively all the time. And it would be interesting to see what that does to people's bodies versus kind of like a 5 or 7 day course treatment, which a lot of people do when they know that they're exposed to COVID. But at the end of the day, like I've said many times before, I'm definitely not a doctor. And the only reason I'm in this is just because I'm trying to fight for compensation reforms and trying to fight for people that are injured and just stand up for them. Because a lot of people can't come and advocate for themselves because they are sick. Like it's a very convenient class of people to injure and to deal with as a company, because so many of them are so sick and they are so burdened with medical costs that they can't actually get out and advocate for themselves. And that's one thing that we've seen is like when we do come here with 15 or 20 people walking the halls, and a lot of them are in wheelchairs or walkers or dealing with neurological disabilities, it's so sad to watch how beat down they get by the end of the trip. Many of them get sick. Last time, one of the guy, Andre, his wheelchair broke, and we're like dragging him through the halls trying to make it to meetings on time with a broken wheelchair. And so it's like, if I was a Pfizer or Moderna executive watching these people just struggle to get through the hallways, I would feel pretty safe knowing that it's going to be hard for them to make a big impact. And so I guess that's kind of where, for me, being as healthy as I am and having the ability to kind of stand up and fight and having a little bit of a platform and a little bit of past credibility and history, then I'm happy to do this, even though it's like been complete, annihilation of the life I knew before. But there's a lot of people that are so much worse off than me, and I would hope that through this journey I can help some of them and hopefully help people in the future from having this happen to them as well.
I mean, what you've just said there is consistent again with reports from around the world. The sort of the autoimmune immunological sensitization, mast cell activation syndrome, the cardiac postural tachycardia type things, and then the neurological type features, people with anything from mild disability to virtual complete paralysis. So these seem to be the category of adverse reactions that we are seeing from around the world. I mean, so you basically, let's move on to what you're doing now, your activism. This is immensely impressive that you're doing this. You've basically changed your lifestyle entirely. You've moved to Washington, D.C., and you're essentially a full-time advocate. And just before we go on, you were talking about advocating for people that are very poorly. But of course, there's people that can't advocate for themselves at all because they're no longer with us. And you're advocating for them as well, which is, it's quite an emotional thought, really, that you're doing that.
Yeah, I feel the weight of it. Like, definitely walking through the halls, I feel the weight of them.
Yeah.
And the other day I had a pretty hard meeting where I had reached out to an office. The health aide decided to meet with me, and I was, really grateful because it was a Democrat office we were trying to get in with. And then, I basically walk in and she's like, oh, we'll just sit down in the front reception area. And there's people coming and going and are sitting on a bench. And there's probably like 4 or 5 different groups of people walking past and doors slamming and phones ringing. And I just looked at her and I was kind of emotional. And I was like, this is the problem, is that you guys don't even care enough to give us a room to talk about this issue. Like, you're saying, oh yeah, I care, let's talk about this. And then we get to sit on the bench in front of everybody with all the distractions, and you're getting pulled into all these different things while I'm trying to tell you about these people that lost their lives because of what you guys pushed on them.
It's insulting.
Absolutely, yeah. It frustrates me to no end. And I think that's what's been difficult, is there has been a lot of people that have tried to come and advocate on their own behalf on the Hill on this issue. And a lot of times they get very emotional and there'll be yelling or crying or screaming. And what that's done is it's caused a lot of offices to completely shut their doors to this issue because they're saying, I don't want to meet with anybody who's vaccine affected. And it's been interesting. I finally got into one of the offices that's the most important to us. And she basically told me, like, thank you so much for doing this, because it makes me feel like we can actually talk about this in a way where we can make progress. Because she has been, death threats and yelled at and screamed at and told she's a horrible person, and she's just trying to help. But again, there are offices that just don't give it the respect and time and attention it deserves. And I feel the weight of that, and it's definitely not lost on me. I've had some, for sure, emotional moments here, but like I said, I don't know. I don't know how else to go about doing this. And, like the choice to change everything and come here, it doesn't feel like a choice, really. It just feels like what needs to happen to make some impact. And there's actually a woman who's done something very similar, but in the past. Her name's Barbara Lowe Fisher. And in the 1980s, she was the one that came and lobbied with dissatisfied parents about the DPT vaccine. And she was the one that got the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program created with Reagan. And when that program was created, it was actually a good solution for a bit. And then basically Congress amended it into hell in the early 90s. And then it's what it is today, where it's just completely broken and people are sitting in those cases for years. But I don't know. She is a model that I look to and I'm inspired by every day to look at what she was able to do as a mother. And, she wrote a book, she did a national media press tour, got it a lot of mainstream attention, and was able to actually make a difference in, thousands of people's lives. But sadly, that program has been really twisted and broken. And, a lot of people are afraid that by us advocating on the Hill for the COVID vaccine injuries, that we're going to inadvertently break the program for all the other vaccine injuries, just because it's going to be such a burden on that program. And it is not going to be able to be funded appropriately without big congressional change. So there's a lot of nuance here, and that's also not lost on me. Like when I'm talking in the halls and having these conversations, I'm not only thinking about the COVID vaccine injured, but all of the other people that have dealt with this, and like the mothers that have children that are affected or potentially passed away from adverse reactions. And one of the things that we'll tell people that are, hesitant, it's like, even if you were to tell everyone in America that they need to take a scoop of peanut butter, you're going to inadvertently kill thousands of people who have peanut butter allergies. So it's like, it's not that every product is a terrible product or that this is all evil people trying to do this. It's that people have genetic predispositions to these products. And I think the mRNA products in particular were not tested enough, and they were not ready to be put on the market. But just in general, there's going to be people that have adverse reactions. And what do you do for them? How do you make this? How do you make them as whole as possible?
The irony is you had essentially no risk at all anyway.
Yeah.
From COVID. So you personally have gone from cruising around the mountains of Montana on your bike to walking around the corridors of power in Washington, D.C. I mean, how are you surviving? You've got accommodation in Washington, or?
Yeah, so I'm working with a group called react19.org, and they've been really great. And so there was a woman who helped donate basically some money to take care of the housing for the few months that I'm here. And so that was amazing. And then we have a page, react19.org/Washington, and we've raised a little bit more money to basically just cover my time here, which has been awesome.
And of course, we'll paste that link if anyone does want to.
Yeah, that would be amazing. And anything that basically goes over our goal will just go into a general lobby fund, where when we do fly people out to do these testimonies or to basically speak about their injuries, and they'll actually have some help in doing that. But it's been all out of pocket.
I don't think going over your goal is an immediate risk, Kyle, is it?
Yeah.
An immediate problem.
Yeah.
How do you see the future then? You plan to be in DC for what, a few months or?
I don't know. It's hard. I think that so there's a summer recess period where basically everyone kind of stops, and then also with the election this year, things are going to be a bit crazy.
Yeah, of course.
The bill that we're supporting, it has a potential chance to move at the end of this year. And so that's what we're trying to focus on, is targeting like the end of this year to see if it can get put into a budget appropriations package and like basically get put into this giant omnibus spending bill and be like a quiet part of the bill and hopefully get through. But that's going to be very difficult, again, unless we can get someone like a Mike Johnson or whoever Speaker of the House to really take this on and be like, I'm going to advocate for you guys and do what's right. And so, yeah, sadly, there's just so much corporate interest here. And that's one thing that I've learned, like, all the movies that you've seen about Washington, D.C., it's like, it is very similar to that when you're here. There's a lot of weird politics. There's a lot of weird backroom discussions. There's, people unwilling to do things just because of the optics of it. And so that's yeah, it's
I
frustrating.
would find it intolerable.
That's kind of how I feel.
I mean,
yeah.
if you can stay in that world for a few months, even, you have my admiration, Carl. I just couldn't stand it. I don't think.
Yeah, well, I talked to a guy who was pretty deeply involved with the Department of Justice for a long time, and he told me the great thing about America is that it's designed so that no one man can make a massive change, good or bad. You know, it basically takes consensus and public awareness to make these changes happen. And the hard thing about that is that we, as the vaccine injured, haven't really been given a fair shot at raising that public awareness just because of the censorship and the way that it's been stigmatized, where, you know, like I had the New York Times reach out to me to do an article, and the title of the article was How the Vaccine Injured Are Fueling the Anti-Vax Movement. And that was what they wanted to call the story. And after talking to him for a bit, he basically was like, okay, I need to rethink this. And I sent him an alternative title that night. And I said, why fair and equitable compensation is the only way to reduce vaccine hesitancy in America. Like, if you do think that these products do work and you do really want to push them on people, then you have to widen the safety net and you have to talk about it and have informed consent. And that's what Barbara Loe Fisher and all these people pushed for so hard in the 80s. And they got it in the 80s, but then it got amended to what it is today. So we just need more transparency.
What an appalling pejorative attitude. That was just...
Yeah. Well, it was funny because he actually told me, he said, it seems like you guys keep going on all these far-right media outlets. And, you know, he said, you in particular, like you've gone on Megyn Kelly. And I was like, if Megyn Kelly is your definition of far-right media outlet, like...
I don't know her, but yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
even if you are, which you're not, you know, far right's a very convenient insult to throw out to anyone you disagree with, of course. You know, why isn't it that people from across the political spectrum aren't opening their arms to you and saying, come and tell us what this problem is? You know, if you are talking to selective people, maybe they're the only ones that are prepared to listen to you. Yeah,
exactly. Well, and it's been really interesting the last few months with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. running for president here in America, because he hasn't really talked about this issue completely on like the CNNs and these bigger MSNBC interviews and whatnot. But I think as it gets closer to the election, if he can really stay in and have a real shot at making a difference, then I think this conversation will be elevated. And his vice presidential candidate, Nicole Shanahan, has been also doing a great job at just raising awareness of the issue. And she also got Moderna and had myocarditis from Moderna. So it's interesting that, you know, she has a personal experience with it as well. So I'm hoping that that can open some doors for the injured to basically get some air. Because, yeah, right now, like, we are the oxygen, and we're just trying to, you know, basically get involved and shine as much truth on this as we can.
But I think RFK has made commitments to investigate this should he become president.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. And I think, like I said, the best thing that he can do for us really is just like talk about it on a debate stage. And that would open up a lot of people's eyes, because in 2021, I was able to ask a few people, like in Senate, I said, what do we need to do to get this to change? Like, how do we get this, you know, how do we get help? And they basically said, what you need is the administration to change over so that the new administration can point the finger at the old one and say, look at how bad they did. And it doesn't matter if it's Democrat or Republican, but they said that's how politics works, is once they can point the finger and make the other person look bad, then you guys will be basically a pawn that they can use to further their narrative. But what's really sad is that for 2024, you know, Biden and Trump are both complicit in this issue. And so neither one of them are willing to point the finger and say, this is a problem, because, you know, Trump did Project Warp Speed and got them developed at that rapid pace. And then, like, kind of the vaccine was his project in a lot of ways. And then Biden was really complicit with the OSHA mandates and kind of just making people feel like they needed to get it. And so neither administration wants to talk about it. So it could be another 4 years or potentially longer until we get a chance to actually air this issue, which is really sad.
It certainly is, Carl, but let's hope it's not. Carl, thank you so much. Firstly, for sharing your personal suffering, but for what you're doing now is just really quite amazing. You're just serving those who can't serve themselves, and that's a noble thing to do. And thank you for doing that. Any links, of course, you want to put below this video, we'll put them. And of course, anytime you want to come on and talk about anything, you're automatically welcome with open arms here and with our viewers.
Yeah, thank you so much, John. I really appreciate you. And yeah, it's definitely
we're straight on.
Yeah, it's not fun. Like I was thinking the other night about, just the life before all of this, of traveling around the world, getting paid to ride mountain bikes, and having, basically not being plugged into the political world at all. They always say ignorance is bliss, and that's definitely true. And so it's hard to just keep digging and digging and digging and finding more information. And then the more you find, the more frustrated you get. But there is hope. Like, there really truly is hope that this can change and that we can make a difference. It's just we need more people to know about it. And at the end of the day, the way you do that is by talking and doing it in a way where it allows people who are on the fence to listen and not be attacked. And so I just want to try to help. And yeah, I appreciate you for what you've done.
No, thank you. And everything you've said there is completely reasonable. If you think Kyle or myself have said anything unreasonable, do let us know in the comments. Because it seems a completely rational, consistent picture to me. And again, thank you for what you're doing, Kyle. And anytime you want to talk, just let me know and we'll be straight back. But for now, thank you for your time and everything you're doing.
Thank you, John. And thanks to everyone for watching.
Absolutely. Thank you for watching.